Today we will be looking at the deadliest dive site in Florida and its two connected cave diving stories that went horribly wrong. As always, viewer discretion is advised. When people talk about Florida's deadliest underwater caves, the first name that usually comes up is Eagle's Nest. And that makes sense. Eagle's Nest has the reputation. It has the deep sinkhole entrance. It has the warning signs. It has a long history of divers who entered the system and never returned alive. But Eagle's Nest is not the deadliest cave diving site in Florida. There is another place in the Florida Panhandle that does not look like a death trap at all. From the surface, it looks calm, clear blue water, a recreational spring, families swimming, divers training, platforms, open water, sunlight, and a place that feels controlled. This place is called Vortex Spring. Vortex Spring is located near Ponce de Leon, Florida. It is one of the best-known freshwater diving sites in the region, and for many visitors, it looks more like a public swimming and training location than a dangerous underwater cave. But the danger is not visible from the parking lot. It begins below the surface. At first, the route can still feel manageable. The entrance is wide enough to see. The water is usually clear. There are recognizable features. A diver can still feel like they are inside a known environment, but as the diver continues, the system changes. The passage pushes toward the cave area at roughly 115 feet. Farther inside the system, the route reaches the locked cave gate. That gate is one of the most important features of Vortex Spring. It separates the controlled public dive area from the more dangerous cave system beyond it. It exists because this cave had already built a deadly history. During the early 1990s, 13 divers were reportedly killed while exploring this cave section of Vortex Spring. After that, access had to be restricted. Beyond the gate, there is no direct path upward. The ceiling is above the diver. The exit is behind the diver. The tunnel becomes the only way out. From the gate onward, more than 1,600 feet of passage has been mapped through the limestone. Some sections reach extreme depth. Other sections become narrow enough that a diver may have to remove tanks, push equipment ahead, and squeeze through restrictions. That is the part of Vortex most visitors never see. In a place like this, the danger is not always sudden. It can begin with one extra turn, one narrow opening, one mistake in gas planning, one moment of poor visibility, one decision to push farther than the exit allows. That is why Vortex Spring is so deceptive. Above water, it looks peaceful. Underwater, it becomes a cave where the only way out is the same route back. And in this video, we are looking at two latest tragedies connected to this same system. On August 18, 2010, Ben McDaniel arrived at Vortex Spring. By then, he was already familiar with the site. He had been diving there regularly, and staff knew him as someone who spent long stretches of time around the spring. That day, he did not enter once and disappear immediately. He first made a dive during the middle of the day. Other divers later remembered seeing him around the cave entrance, paying close attention to the area near the restricted section. He was not just swimming around the basin, he appeared to be studying the route. After that first dive, Ben surfaced. He went back to the dive shop. Security cameras later showed him making a transaction to fill his tanks. Then he stayed at the site for the rest of the afternoon. He checked his equipment, he worked around his gear. He made notes in his dive log. He sat near the spring, tanks beside him, the water calm behind him, the cave entrance waiting below. As evening came in, Ben prepared for another dive. Before entering the water, he called his mother. That phone call became the last confirmed contact he had with his family. Around 7:30 p.m., Ben entered Vortex Spring again, and this time, he descended with lights and a helmet. That detail matters because a helmet and lights strongly suggest he was not planning a simple open water swim in the basin. He was heading toward the cave. Two employees, Chuck Cronin and Eduardo Taran, were also underwater that evening after doing their own dive. As they were coming back, they saw Ben descending. Taran already suspected that Ben had previously been forcing or manipulating the cave gate. The proper rule was simple: no cave certification, no access beyond the gate. But that night, Taran went down to the gate and unlocked it to let Ben finally go beyond and explore. Ben moved through as Taran watched him enter the restricted cave section. Then Taran ascended upwards towards the land and returned to Cronin. That was the last confirmed sighting of Ben McDaniel. From this point, the confirmed timeline stops. So the next sequence should be shown as the main accident theory. Ben moves past the gate. The open basin is behind him, where the easy recreational part of Vortex is gone. His light moves forward through the limestone passage. The cave is no longer a place where he can swim directly upward if something goes wrong. The only exit is behind him, through the same route he just entered. The first part beyond the gate would still allow movement, but the deeper sections of vortex become more restrictive. The passage tightens, the ceiling closes in, the walls narrow, his fins and tanks become harder to control. The deeper he goes, the more expensive every minute becomes. At this depth, air does not last the way it does near the surface. Each breath uses more gas because the pressure is higher. If he pauses too long, explores too far, or struggles through a restriction, the exit becomes harder to afford. In the accident theory, Ben keeps pushing forward. He may be trying to prove that he can handle the cave. He may be trying to reach an area he had marked in his own notes. He may be trying to get farther than he had gone before. Then something goes wrong. It could be a restriction. It could be a turn that costs too much time. It could be silt disturbed by movement. At that point, panic does not need to look dramatic. It can begin with one small calculation. Too much distance behind him, too little gas left, too much cave between him and the gate. If he tries to turn around inside a narrow section, his tanks can strike the wall and not allow him to turn. If he pushes into a tight crack, his gear can wedge. If he backs out too aggressively, the floor can silt up and visibility drops. In this theoretical version, he dies inside the cave. But later you'll find out, that might not be the only case. Hours passed, and Ben never came back. On some earlier late dives, employees had waited until they saw bubbles on the surface. Those bubbles meant Ben had returned toward the exit and was decompressing before surfacing. On this night, they did not wait for that sign. They left. The next morning, Ben's truck was still in the parking lot. At first, that did not trigger an immediate emergency. Vortex was a busy recreational spring, and vehicles could sit there while people moved around the park. But the truck remained there. Then, another day passed. By August 20th, staff realized Ben had not been seen. Taryn contacted the Holmes County Sheriff's Office. Deputies arrived and sealed the spring area. They checked Ben's truck. His wallet was inside. His phone was inside. Cash was still there. There were no obvious signs of a fight around the vehicle. At his family's beach house, his dog had been left unfed. That made it difficult to believe he had simply left voluntarily without telling anyone. The first assumption was that Ben had drowned inside the cave. Search divers entered Vortex expecting to find a body. They searched the known route. They checked the cave passage. They looked in places where a diver might become trapped. They found nothing. More experienced cave divers then pushed farther. Recovery specialist Ed Sorensen later entered the system and searched deeper areas that normal divers could not safely reach. He found no body, no clear trace, no strong evidence that Ben had pushed into the farthest sections. 2 tanks connected to Ben were found near the cave entrance area, but they did not solve the case because tanks towards the entrance meant no trouble inside. The longer the search continued, the stranger the case became. If Ben had drowned in a normal, reachable section, searchers expected to find him. If he had forced himself into a tight restriction, they expected marks on the cave. If he had died along the route, they expected some physical sign. But nothing appeared. That is where the second theory begins. Some divers and investigators started asking whether Ben was ever inside the cave after that final sighting. Maybe he came back out. Maybe something happened after he surfaced. Maybe someone moved his body before authorities were called. Maybe the dive story became the surface layer of a different crime. Ben's family later considered foul play as a serious possibility. There was also a theory that he staged his own disappearance, but his family strongly rejected that. He had left behind his dog, his girlfriend, his family, his phone, his wallet, and no clear trail of a planned escape. So Ben's case ends with 2 competing possibilities. In the accident theory, he died somewhere beyond the gate in a hidden or unreachable part of Vortex Spring. In the foul play theory, the cave did not kill him at all. It only became the place where everyone was told to look. No body was ever found. No final chamber was confirmed. No exact death scene was proven. The last confirmed image remains simple. Ben McDaniel descending through clear water, reaching the locked gate, and passing into the cave. The story doesn't end here, because less than 2 years later, Vortex Spring became the setting for another tragedy. This time, involving a man whose dive would be forever linked to Ben McDaniel's unsolved disappearance. On March 18, 2012, Larry Higginbotham arrived at Vortex Spring. He was 43 years old and had come from Biloxi, Mississippi. By this point, Vortex Spring was no longer just known for old cave deaths from the 1990s. It was also known as the place where Ben McDaniel had disappeared less than 2 years earlier. Ben's body had never been found. His family had offered a reward for anyone who could recover him. That reward had eventually reached $30,000. Cave divers suspected the unresolved McDaniel case may have been part of what drew him into Vortex that day. Ben was still missing, the reward was still being offered, and the cave still held the answer everyone was searching for. Larry arrived in the morning. According to reports connected to the sheriff's office account, he went into the dive shop at around 9:40 a.m. and received access to the cave lock. He was not diving with a full team. He was the only diver scheduled for that day. His girlfriend, Louise O'Brien, was at the springs with him. Before the dive, Larry gave her instructions. If he did not return within the expected time, she was supposed to contact Eduardo Terran. Then, Larry entered the water. He descended into the clear spring basin. The first part would have looked controlled from above. One diver dropping through blue water, bubbles rising behind him. The basin still visible. Then he moved toward the cavern entrance. From there, he continued toward the cave route. At some point, he passed into the overhead environment. Now, he was no longer in a place where he could simply swim upward. He had to return through the same passage. Inside the cave, Larry moved deeper. He passed through the route toward the more restrictive section. And suddenly, things started going from bad to worse. Larry reached an area near a tight restriction. Larry pushed into a place where the passage became too narrow. His body and equipment no longer moved freely. His tanks, shoulders, or gear could not clear the restriction cleanly. He was now in a pinch. In a cave, being stuck is not like being stuck on land. And in an underwater cave, it's a nightmare. There is no standing up, no pulling off a backpack and breathing normally, no calling for help, no direct route to the surface. Everything has to be solved while breathing from a tank, in darkness, under pressure, inside a passage that may be too tight to turn around. Larry tried to back out, but backing out through a restriction is harder than entering it. When a diver pushes forward, the body follows the direction of the passage. When he tries to reverse, the tanks, hoses, shoulders, and fins can catch on every edge behind him. If he moved too aggressively, silt could rise from the floor. The clear water could begin turning cloudy. His light would still work, but the light would now reflect back into particles. The cave would become brighter and harder to see at the same time. At this stage, the problem becomes time. Every attempt to free himself costs breathing gas. Every failed movement raises stress. Stress increases breathing rate. The faster he breathes, the faster the gas drops. If he stops to calm down, he loses time. If he fights the restriction, he loses air faster. If he exhales too hard, changes position, or shifts tanks incorrectly, he can wedge even worse. This is the core of Larry's accident. He got into a restriction and could not get himself back out. The cave did not need a collapse. It did not need a monster chamber. It only needed a space slightly too tight, too deep, and too far from help. While this was happening inside the cave, his girlfriend was still above water. Larry had told her when to worry. After about an hour and a half, he had not surfaced. She contacted Eduardo Terran, as Larry had instructed. At first, the situation was not treated as a confirmed death or emergency. She was reportedly told that Larry still had enough air, so she waited. More time passed. There were still no bubbles, no surfacing diver, no signal from below. She became worried again. The answer was still that he should have enough air. But inside the cave, the problem was not just how much air Larry had started with. The problem was that he was trapped. A diver can have air and still die if he cannot move. Eventually, Larry was too overdue to dismiss. The search began. Divers entered the spring and moved toward the cave route. A tank was found near the cave gate. That confirmed Larry had been in the cave area. The search now had a direction. They pushed deeper into the system. Then Larry's body was located. He was not near the surface. He was not just inside the cavern entrance. He was deep inside the cave, reportedly around 1,200 feet in. Recovery divers later described him as being in a tight area. Ed Sorensen said Larry had to be pulled back through 4 tight restrictions. That means the recovery was dangerous by itself. To bring him out, divers had to enter the same route, reach the body, control visibility, manage their own gas, and move Larry back through the restrictions that had trapped him. Every restriction had to be handled in reverse. Every movement risked stirring silt. Every delay increased risk for the recovery team. Eventually, Larry's body was brought out. Only after the recovery did the larger question return. Was Larry there only for a dive? Or had Ben McDaniel's reward pulled him deeper into the cave? There was no public proof that Larry entered Vortex to search for Ben or collect the money. His family said he was not looking for Ben. But some cave divers believed the connection was hard to ignore. Ben had disappeared in that same cave. The reward was active. Larry died near a difficult restriction. And the body of Ben McDaniel had still not been found. After Larry's death, Ben's parents withdrew the reward. That decision showed how dangerous the situation had become. The reward had been meant to bring closure, but it may have encouraged exactly the kind of dive experience cave divers feared. Someone going farther into Vortex Spring because the mystery was still unsolved. Larry's death gave the cave one confirmed ending. Ben's case still had none. One confirmed death. One unresolved disappearance. The gate now features a memorial plaque for both the divers saying, "Larry and Matt were here." And together, they turned Vortex Spring into one of the most disturbing cave diving sites in Florida.